Since we're entering August, still in the harvest of wheat that symbolizes the yield of our intellectual function, I thought to take a step back and look at the bigger picture from the point of view of what is called the old and new man. It is because we have an intellectual function that we can do this. We can project, we can look at the past of our work, even go back years, and then have a kind of an intuition of where we might be headed. And the old and the new man are very much an outline of this process, of this journey. We will rely on this painting mostly. It is perhaps one of the most intelligent, esoteric Christian paintings I've ever encountered. As you can see, it's not, you wouldn't say that it's beautiful. I mean, it's obviously pretty, it's not ugly, but it was not created for beauty, unlike many other Christian works of art. It is very packed, fully packed with information. Each corner and each section having a lot happening in it. We won't have time in the span of this hour to go through everything, even though many of you have studied this with me, and so you know from other lectures the different areas and their significance. But we will take a more general look at this painting, and through it, at this idea, this bigger idea of the old and new man. To approach this painting, we have to understand something fundamental about the Bible. Something I've learned that I cannot take for granted that all of you know. It is not important whether you know it or not. If you do not, and I tell you, then you're set. But not everyone knows that in the Christian world, at least, the Bible is made of an Old and a New Testament. Here, the division is very much related to time. The Old Testament is quite a bit older than the New Testament, has a very long range of about 1,000 years, from 1500 to 500 before the Common Era. The New Testament, of course, begins with the birth of Jesus, and it is written down a little later. That's why 50 and not 0. That's where we start seeing the first testaments of the story of the life of Jesus. Mujtaba, the Quran embraces both of these and cites quotes from both of them extensively and builds upon them. Because you see, schools that come later always use the schools from the past as their foundations. And they're wise to do so. Why not? If other people figured things out, why not benefit from their knowledge? Seemingly, this is a technical division. Something that was written long ago is called the Old Testament, and then something that was written more recently is still bound, canonized in the same book, but is put in a separate section called the New Testament. As we shall see today, this is true on one more functional level, but it has a much deeper and more important meaning. Just for your reference, whenever we speak of, say, the creation of the world in 7 days, all the stories around Abraham, who is visited by the 3 men, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the story of Noah's Ark, all these stories come from the book of Genesis in the Old Testament. When we speak of Moses liberating the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, that is also part of the Old Testament. And when we speak of the kings, of the unification of the kingdom of Israel, King Saul, King David, King Solomon, that too is featured in the Old Testament. By contrast, anything related to Jesus, we often feature the Annunciation, for example. We will actually see one version today. That story and anything else, the birth, the adoration of the Magi, the massacre of the innocents, all these stories related to Jesus come from the Gospels, which are part of the New Testament. Okay? Just as a general orientation. The reason this is important is because this painting refers to this division in a very fundamental way. First of all, you can see that it is divided right in the middle by this tree. Interestingly, the tree is in one season on its left and in another season on its right. On the left, the branches are bare. On the right, they have foliage. And all the different scenes, the different vignettes featured in each side to the left of the tree belong to the Old Testament. The vignettes featured on the right side of the tree belong to the New Testament. So we have a painting that is merging together the old and the new. And you can already see, probably guess, which direction this presentation is taking. Now, in the foreground of the painting is this naked figure seated on the stump right in the middle of the painting, right between those two worlds. And notice that his lower part is rooted in the old, right? It's facing and actually touching the old, but his upper part is striving, turning towards the new. So we are looking at some kind of a transition here, or at least an attempt at a transition, coming from the old and going to the new. A related thought from George Gurdjieff. A man must realize that he indeed consists of two men. One is the man he calls I, and whom others call Ouspensky. The other is the real he, the real I, which appears in his life only for very short moments, and which can become firm and permanent only after a very lengthy period of work. All of us attending today have these two people in us. The old never goes, by the way. Given that you are in this work, we have to assume that you are developing, you are building anew, but the old never goes. It stays at the foundation of the new. The old man, first of all, is old because it began very early in our lives. We were born in essence, lived for a few years in a so-called Garden of Eden, carefree, under very few laws, didn't need to worry about food and income and politics and nothing. We had this utopic world as essence, as children in essence. Anyone who works with children, anyone who has children knows very well this world. But little by little, it got covered with knowledge. The serpent crawls on the trunk of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and persuades Eve. He tempts and persuades Eve to taste of knowledge. She persuades Adam, and thereafter they start covering this essence with the layer that will become personality, will send us away from this carefree utopia and kind of drag us down into the world as we know it as adults. This happens very early and gradually. By the time of our late teens, it's very advanced, very well developed. And so it is old. It is there from almost the very beginning of our lives. It is also unconscious. We did not plan it. We were not aware even that it was happening, right? Today, through this work and this knowledge, we can look back and realize, oh, right, that started happening there and I lost something. We can see that, we can understand that, but we didn't understand it while it was happening. It was happening unconsciously.